The vast emptiness of space was silent, but inside the bridge of the Varkonian scout ship Dralaxis, tension filled the air. Commander Zirek stood tall, his dark scales shimmering under the artificial lights. His crew worked in silence, their eyes locked on the large screen before them. It displayed a single planet, covered in deep blue oceans and sprawling green landmasses. A world classified as a Class 14 Deathworld. A world that had been forbidden to approach. Earth. Zarek's voice was firm. Are the readings correct? The science officer, Kelris, nodded hesitantly. Confirmed, Commander. This planet's gravity is 120% stronger than standard. The atmosphere is rich in oxygen, which increases aggression in most species. The weather patterns are unstable. Violent storms, earthquakes, extreme heat and cold. He swallowed. And the biosphere is the deadliest we've ever seen. Panic spread through the bridge of the Dralaxis like wildfire. Commander Zirek stood frozen, his claws gripping the edges of his console. The alien voice still echoed through the ship's speakers. Too late. Kelris frantically worked at his station. Commander, the message came from the planet's surface, but I still can't locate the exact source. Zirek forced himself to focus. Initiate emergency retreat. Get us out of this system. The engines roared to life, and the ship shot upward, breaking through the upper layers of Earth's atmosphere. The crew let out a collective breath of relief as the blue planet shrank behind them. Then the ship stopped moving. The entire vessel shuddered violently, throwing crew members against the walls. Warning alarms blared. Zirek pulled himself back up. What happened? Kelris' eyes widened in horror as he stared at the readings. Commander, we're not moving. Varric snarled. That's impossible. There's nothing nearby to hold us in place. Zarek's mind raced. No ships, no tractor beams, no energy signatures at all. Yet the Dralaxis was caught, like an insect in a spider's web. Something on Earth was keeping them here. Kelris' voice was barely above a whisper. We've triggered something. The invisible chains. Zarek turned to Kelris. Options. The science officer's fingers trembled as he studied the data. If this were a standard gravitational lock, we could break free with a full power engine burst. But this is different. It's not coming from a single source. Zirek frowned. Explain. Kelris gulped. It's everywhere. The force holding us in place, it's spread across the entire planet. Varric's fists clenched. A planetary-wide defense system. That's impossible for a primitive species. But Zirek knew what they had assumed about humanity was wrong. Kelris continued, his voice unsteady. This level of control over gravity, it's decades, maybe centuries ahead of Council technology. A terrifying realization settled over the crew. Humanity wasn't just surviving on their death world. They had mastered it. A new threat appears. The ship's lights flickered. The air inside the bridge grew heavy. The artificial gravity fluctuated for a brief second, then stabilized. A cold chill ran through Zyrek's body. Did anyone else feel that? Varric's tail flicked nervously. Felt like something touched the ship. Kelris suddenly paled. His voice shook. Commander, we're being scanned again, but not by radar or standard systems. He turned slowly. It feels like they're studying us. A deep silence fell over the bridge. Zirek had enough. He slammed his fist on the command panel. Prepare all weapons, if this species thinks they can. The ship's communication screen flickered to life. A face appeared. The crew stared in shock at the image before them. It was a human. His face was calm, his eyes piercing. He looked directly at them, as if he could see into their very souls. Then he smiled. Welcome to Earth. Silence filled the bridge of the Dralaxis. Commander Zirek and his crew stared at the screen, their hearts pounding. The human, this fragile-looking creature from the most feared death world in the galaxy, simply smiled at them. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't a threatening one either. It was calm, controlled, knowing, like a predator watching its prey struggle. Zyrek's throat was dry, but he forced himself to speak. "Who are you?" The human's voice was smooth, confident. "My name is irrelevant. What matters is that you and your crew have trespassed where you should not be." Kelris whispered, "They shouldn't even know we exist." The human's eyes flicked to Kelris, as if he'd heard him. "We know many things." A cold chill ran through the crew. The silent power. Varric, ever the warrior, bared his fangs. "You're bluffing. Your species should not have the technology to detect us, let alone hold our ship in place." The human tilted his head. "Is that what your council told you?" Zyrek's fingers tightened into a fist. "Enough games. Release our ship, and we will leave in peace." The human chuckled. It wasn't forced. It wasn't mocking. It was genuine amusement. "Leave." He leaned forward slightly. "Oh, Commander, you still don't understand, do you?" The screen flickered. A new image replaced the human's face. The truth revealed. Zyrek's blood ran cold. It was a star map, their own star map. The locations of council-controlled planets, military bases, and high-value worlds. Everything. Kelris gasped. "How? How did they get this?" The human's voice was calm. "Your ship's database is interesting. You encrypt your data well, but not well enough." Varric snarled. "Lies." The human sighed. "Your vessel operates on quantum-based signal relays, correct?" He leaned forward. "The problem with quantum encryption is that if someone understands the fundamental nature of the universe better than you do, they can listen." Zyrek's breath hitched. "They hacked us before we even landed." The human smiled again. "I told you," he said simply. "We see you." A final warning. Zyrek had led hundreds of missions across the galaxy. He had faced horrors that made weaker creatures tremble. But this was something else. The humans had let them come, let them scan, let them believe they were undetected. And now, they were playing with them. The human's voice turned serious. "You have two choices, Commander. 1. You and your crew leave, forget this planet exists, and tell your council to do the same." He let the words sink in. "Or 2. You stay, you fight, and you learn why this world is feared." Zyrek didn't move. His crew looked to him for an answer. Varric's voice was low. "Commander, I don't think this is a battle we can win." Kelris gulped. "If they could hack our systems without us even noticing, imagine what else they can do." Zyrek looked at the screen. The human waited. And for the first time in his life, Zyrek felt truly powerless. His voice was quiet. "Prepare the ship for departure." The human smiled wider. "Smart choice." Then the screen went dark. And just like that, the ship was free. The beginning of the end. As the Dralexis fled Earth's orbit, Zyrek stared at the cursed blue planet one last time. He had escaped. But deep down, he knew the real danger had just begun. Because if humans were already this advanced while trapped on their Deathworld, what happens when they finally leave? The Dralexis shot through the void of space, its engines burning at maximum speed. The blue planet, Earth, shrunk behind them, but the weight of what had happened remained heavy on the crew. Commander Zyrek sat in silence, staring at the dark expanse ahead. No one on the bridge spoke. They were too shaken, too disturbed by what they had just witnessed. A Class 14 Deathworld should have been nothing more than a cursed place of chaos and destruction. But Earth was more than that. It was a trap, a carefully laid web. And the humans were waiting. A message that cannot be ignored. Kelris hesitated before breaking the silence. "Commander, what do we tell the Council?" Varric scoffed. "The truth. That we were caught, held like prey. And then, let go." His voice was bitter. "They didn't see us as a threat. They let us leave because they wanted us to." Zyrek's claws tapped against his armrest. That's what concerns me the most. Kelris's screen beeped. Commander, incoming transmission. Priority level. Red. The Galactic Council is demanding our report. Zurek took a slow breath. He had dreaded this moment. Patch it through. The holoscreen lit up, and the Grand Chancellor of the Galactic Council, an elder of the Lorax species, appeared. His multiple eyes locked onto Zurek, his expression cold. Commander Zurek, the Chancellor said, his voice heavy with expectation. You were ordered to observe the Forbidden World. Explain why your ship fled its orbit at full speed. Zurek knew hesitation would only make things worse. He sat up straighter. Chancellor, the world classified as a Class 14 Deathworld is far more dangerous than we thought. One of the other council members, a rigid-faced Varnakian, folded his arms. Elaborate. Zyrek's jaw tightened. Earth is not just a Deathworld. It is controlled. Its inhabitants have adapted to its dangers so well that they have turned the planet itself into a weapon. The council murmured among themselves. The Chancellor raised a hand, silencing them. And the species that resides there. Zyrek's throat felt dry. They are human, he said. And they are not primitive. A long silence followed. The council's secret. Finally, the Chancellor spoke. You encountered them directly. Zurek nodded. They spoke to us. They hacked our ship's systems. They held us in orbit without any visible technology. And then they released us with a warning. The Chancellor's expression darkened. A warning? They said we had two choices, Zurek said. Leave and forget they exist, or stay and learn why their world is feared. Varric growled. They were toying with us. For the first time, Zurek saw something in the Chancellor's expression he had never seen before. Fear. The council members whispered urgently among themselves, but Zurek had seen enough political games to recognize when someone already knew the truth. They're not surprised. Kelris whispered under his breath. Zyrek's eyes narrowed. Chancellor, how much does the council already know about Earth? The room fell into silence once again. Then, the Chancellor finally spoke. Enough. Zyrek's claws tightened. Enough. That meant they had known. For a long time. The true reason Earth was forbidden. The Chancellor let out a slow breath. You are right, Commander. The humans are not primitive. He paused, as if weighing his words. They were never meant to be part of the galactic community. Zurek frowned. Why? The Chancellor's many eyes locked onto his. Because they do not belong among us, he said. They are something else. Zyrek's heartbeat quickened. What are you saying? The Chancellor's next words made his blood turn to ice. Commander, listen carefully. The humans did not evolve on that world. A heavy silence crashed over the room. Kelris looked stunned. That's impossible. The Chancellor's voice was grim. No, it is the truth. Zurek could barely process what he was hearing. Then how did they get there? The Chancellor leaned forward. They were put there. A dangerous truth. The words rang in Zurek's ears. Put there. By who? And why? The Chancellor's face hardened. Earth was their prison. The place designed to contain them. To ensure they would never become a threat. Varric's voice was low with disbelief. A species strong enough to survive a Class 14 Deathworld was imprisoned. The Chancellor nodded. And yet, despite every danger, despite every attempt to keep them trapped, the humans did not just survive. His voice turned to a whisper. They evolved beyond what we ever imagined. The galaxy's worst nightmare. Zurek felt his stomach twist. This wasn't just a forbidden planet. This wasn't just a dangerous species. This was something far worse. The humans had been left on a world that should have destroyed them. Instead, they had become stronger. And now, they were ready. Zyrek's voice was barely above a whisper. Chancellor, what happens when they finally escape? The Chancellor's eyes darkened. We pray that day never comes. Commander Zurek sat frozen in his seat, His mind raced, struggling to process what the Grand Chancellor had just revealed. Earth wasn't their home. It was their prison. Kelris's fingers trembled over his console. This doesn't make sense. Who would do that? And why? The Chancellor's expression was grave. That knowledge has been lost to time. But what we do know is this: whoever imprisoned them is long gone. And yet, the humans remain. Varric's tail twitched, his instincts screaming danger. You mean they outlasted their captors? The Chancellor nodded slowly. Yes. A shiver ran through the crew. A species so dangerous that an unknown force had once locked them away. Yet, against all odds, they had endured. And now, Zurich realized with a sinking feeling, they were no longer contained. The Council's fearful plan. Zurich took a slow breath, forcing his mind to focus. If the humans were meant to be imprisoned, why leave their planet unguarded? Why not keep them contained? The Chancellor's many eyes locked onto him. Because no prison lasts forever. And when it begins to crack, sometimes it's best to let it collapse completely. Varric's ears twitched. What do you mean? The Chancellor's voice dropped to a whisper. The Council has been watching Earth for centuries. We knew this day would come. He looked directly at Zurich. That is why you were sent. Not to observe, not to investigate, but to confirm what we already feared. Kelris inhaled sharply. You mean? Yes. The Chancellor's voice was cold. The humans have grown too strong. They are no longer contained by their world. They have reached the limits of their prison. And so, the Council has already decided. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Earth must be destroyed. The desperation of the weak. Silence. Then Zurich stood up so fast his chair crashed to the floor. Destroyed. He roared. Do you even understand what you're saying? They are not mindless beasts. They are an intelligent species, far more intelligent than we ever imagined. The Chancellor's gaze didn't waver. That is exactly why they must be eliminated. Varric slammed his fist on the console. This is madness. No, the Chancellor said. This is survival. His next words sent a chill through Zyric's bones. Tell me, Commander, if a species was dangerous enough to be locked away by an ancient power, would you really risk letting them loose? Zyric's fists clenched. He wanted to argue, to deny it, but deep down, a part of him understood why the Council was afraid. A species strong enough to survive Earth, the most hostile planet in known space, was a species that could dominate the stars. And the galaxy was not ready for that. The fate of Earth. Kelris's voice was shaking. Commander, what do we do? Zurich felt every eye on him. The weight of the decision pressed against his chest. He thought back to that human smile. The way he spoke with such confidence. He realized the truth. They already know. The humans weren't oblivious. They weren't naive. They were waiting for this. Zurich turned to the Chancellor, his voice cold. If we attack them, do you really believe we will win? The Chancellor's gaze flickered, but he remained firm. We have no choice. A message flashed across Kelris's console. His eyes widened. Commander, his voice trembled. We're being hailed. Zyric's blood ran cold. By who? Kelris swallowed. Earth. The bridge fell into dead silence. The Chancellor's voice hardened. Put it through. Kelris hesitated, then pressed the command. The screen flickered, and once again, the human appeared. He smiled. Not a smile of amusement. Not a smile of arrogance. A smile of understanding. The human's eyes locked onto Zurich's. Then he spoke. You're afraid. He leaned forward. You should be. The bridge of the Drelexis was silent. Every crew member stared at the screen, at the human who now held their fate in his hands. Commander Zurich could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The Grand Chancellor had just announced that Earth must be destroyed. But now, the humans were listening. And judging by the look on this man's face, they weren't surprised. A calm before the storm. The human leaned forward slightly, his voice smooth and controlled. "We have known about your fear for a long time," he said. "We have watched as you monitored us. We have listened as your counsel whispered in the dark." Varric growled under his breath. They'd been spying on us. The human's lips twitched. Spying? No, we simply understand the nature of fear. He tilted his head slightly. After all, we were placed here because of it. The Chancellor's expression remained unreadable. "You admit it then, that Earth was your prison." The human chuckled. "We've known for a long time." He tapped his fingers together. "The real question is, do you know why?" Zarek stiffened. "What do you mean?" The human's gaze sharpened. "You think we were locked away because we were a threat, because we were too dangerous to be left unchecked." He leaned back, shaking his head slightly. "That's only part of the truth." Zyrek's heart pounded. "Then what's the rest?" The human's smile faded. "We were imprisoned because of what we could become. The evolution of monsters." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. The Chancellor's voice was cold. "Elaborate." The human's expression darkened. "The ones who put us here, the ancient force you have long since forgotten, saw what we were capable of. They saw how we adapt, how we grow, how we turn every hardship into strength." His voice lowered. "They knew that no matter what prison they built, no matter what challenges they placed before us," he looked straight at the Chancellor, "we would survive." Kelleris shuddered. The human continued. "And now, the seal is breaking. We are no longer bound to our world." He tilted his head slightly. "So, tell me, Chancellor, what exactly do you think happens next?" The Chancellor's voice was sharp. "You think we will allow your kind to roam free?" The human's smile returned, this time wider. "Allow," he repeated. He laughed. The sound sent a chill through Zyrek's spine. "You still think you're in control," the human mused. "You still believe you have the power to make that choice." He gestured at the screen. "We intercepted your transmission before you even finished it." He smiled. "Your council's decision to destroy Earth. That was never your choice to make. The first move." Zarek's blood turned to ice. What have you done?" The human clasped his hands together. "Oh, nothing too drastic." Kelleris gasped. "Commander, incoming reports from multiple council fleets. Their communication networks err." He stopped, his face pale. "Offline." Zyrek's heart pounded. You cut off the council's military." The human smiled. "Consider it a warning." The Chancellor's voice was sharp. "You think you can stop us?" The human exhaled slowly, almost patiently. "You misunderstand," he said. "We are not stopping you." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "We are letting you live." A thick silence followed. Zarek could feel the tension in the room shift. The power dynamic had changed, and for the first time, it wasn't the council that held the leash. The Chancellor's voice was low. You intend to wage war?" The human's expression didn't change. "War?" He tilted his head. "No." He let the words settle before finishing. "We intend to leave." The inevitable escape. Kelleris's voice trembled. "They're leaving." The human nodded. "We have spent centuries preparing. We have studied the stars from afar. We have listened, observed, and learned from the civilizations around us." His smile faded. "And now, the time has come." Zyrek's breath was unsteady. "You're saying, you're finally escaping the prison." The human's gaze locked onto his. "We already have." A tremor ran through the bridge. Kelleris's hands hovered over the console. "Commander, I'm detecting multiple large-scale energy readings across Earth's orbit." His voice shook. "They're launching." Varric's eyes widened. They had ships ready. Zarek clenched his fists. He turned back to the human on the screen. "Where are you going?" he asked. The human smiled one last time. "Everywhere. The dawn of a new age." The screen went black. The Drelex's crew sat in stunned silence. Earth, humanity, was no longer contained, and deep in Zurek's gut, he felt something far worse than fear, something no species in the galaxy had ever felt before. The weight of an unstoppable future. The humans were free. And now, the galaxy would have to face them. The bridge of the Drelexis was silent. The crew sat frozen, the weight of the moment pressing down on them like an invisible force. Humanity had escaped. For centuries, the Galactic Council had believed Earth was nothing more than a sealed tomb, a place where a dangerous species was locked away, never to reach the stars. But now, they were here, and they were not asking for permission. The Council's desperation. Zurek turned to Kelris. "Get me a full tactical scan." "How many ships?" Kelris's fingers danced over the console, his breath shaky. I don't know how this is possible." His voice dropped. "But there are thousands." Zyrek's stomach dropped. Varric's claws scraped against his console. "That's impossible. Earth doesn't have the resources for a fleet that large. The Council has always monitored their planetary output." Kelris swallowed hard. "Then they've been hiding it. For centuries." The Grand Chancellor's voice broke through the silence. "We cannot allow this. We must stop them. Now." Zurek turned to face him. "How?" "Our fleet's communications are down. Our forces are scattered. And the humans." He glanced back at the screen. They were already in motion. The first step into the stars. Across the vastness of space, Earth's fleet was emerging from its homeworld. Their ships were smaller than most galactic war vessels, but they moved with an unnatural precision. Their formations were sharp, their tactics disciplined. These were not the desperate refugees of a doomed world. These were soldiers. The human commander reappeared on the screen, his expression calm. "You feared that one day we would break free," he said. "And you were right." He leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "But what you failed to understand was that we were never trying to escape." He paused. "We were preparing." Zyrek's chest tightened. "Preparing for what?" The human's eyes gleamed. "For the day we take our place among the stars. The war that never happened." The Chancellor's voice was filled with barely controlled rage. "You expect us to simply allow this? The Council will never stand for it." The human's expression didn't change. "You misunderstand, Chancellor." He gestured toward the vastness of space, where human ships continued their silent, calculated advance. "This is not a request." The Chancellor slammed his fist on the console. "You will start a war." The human's lips curled slightly. "If we wanted war, it would have already begun." Zurek felt a chill run through him. They weren't attacking. They weren't demanding anything. They were simply leaving. And the Council? They were powerless to stop it. Varric exhaled sharply. "So that's it. They're just going." The human nodded. "Today, we step into the galaxy as equals. You can either accept that or be left behind." He let the silence stretch before speaking one last time. "Your fear kept us in chains, but fear does not stop progress. It never has." He leaned back, his expression unreadable. "This is the dawn of a new age." And with that, the transmission cut out, a future unwritten. Zurek stared at the blank screen, his mind reeling. The humans were no longer a theoretical threat, no longer a whispered fear in the Council's archives. They were real. And now, they were everywhere. Varric exhaled. "What happens now?" Zurek had no answer. But deep in his gut, he knew one thing. The galaxy would never be the same again. The age of humanity had begun.